The only thing I can think when you bring up Muschamp, and I'll bring up the dirty word one last time, is that I think this guy has proven over his tenure at Florida and South Carolina that he needs somebody else. Not that he's not involved in recruiting as a defensive coordinator, but give me the players, hand Muschamp the whiteboard, have him scheme up the defense. That is the expertise right there, scheming up defenses.
It was just maddening, Mark, because again, you look back at the recruiting rankings and they brought in top 20 classes, at minimum top 25. And it just it felt like, Pick Six Previews. I got his magazine sitting right here. One of my good buddies, Brett Ciancia. He's gotten his magazine every year, like a conversion rate of which teams do the best job of taking the talent in their recruiting classes and winning games and who does the worst. Carolina was like second to last in those rankings, which meant they were getting talent. They were doing the least with the talent they got. And again, that's why I just fell out of recruiting. I was like, why am I going to get overexcited and overhyped for a guy that this coaching staff has proven they're going to get him on campus and just do nothing with him? I mean, that's how I felt. So I've got a much different take on recruiting now. I think last year showed again that Beamer and company, they have a staff in place that will be able to do more with less. And by the way, I want to address a comment I see from Kurt W. in your chat that says, is this guy acting like stars aren't important? That's not at all what I'm acting like. Actually, quite the opposite. I believe in blue chip ratio. I think to realistically compete for championships, you've got to be, the 50% or greater of blue chippers, 4 and 5 stars on your roster. Stars are important. They're not everything. We've seen it firsthand at South Carolina. The greatest of all. Right. Yeah. The greatest of all time a lot of them are 2 and 3 stars, right? That played at South Carolina. But to say that stars mean nothing would be ignorant. The only fan bases that say, well, stars don't matter, they're not important. The only fan bases that say that are fan bases that their teams don't recruit at a high level. Because I can tell you what, the teams that are in the top 10 in recruiting, they think the star system's great. They think it's flawless. They think it's perfect. So I refuse to be on one extreme or the other. I think stars give you a good indication of the type of talent level guys are, but just because you're a 5-star doesn't mean you're going to be all conference, everything, all American. Like if you don't come in, develop, evolve as a football player, put in the work, them stars don't mean shit. Give me a hungry 3-star kid with upside versus a 5-star that just because he has a nice 40 and, he peaked at 16 years old. You know what I'm saying? Like the stars don't mean, but they are important. Let's not just throw them away, but there is a balance there. There's a balance with the star system.
Absolutely. There's a balance. And I also think that if you really study it and break it down, the closer you get to the top, the more they matter.
Yeah.
The more the difference between 5 and 15 is significant, as opposed to if you're 40 and my team's 50, who knows?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Mark, rankings, if you take the average player star rating and you can find a gap between, let's say, 1 and 8 is the same as like 8 and 25, it drops considerably. And therefore, it's almost like college football on the field. Once you get past the elite, anybody can beat anybody to a certain extent.
Yeah. I mean, this sounds so obvious, but it's like everybody wants to talk about coaching and, this coach is this coach is that. Coaches aren't miracle workers, right? They're coaches. Players win games, coaches lose them, right? Like they are what they are. Because when I watch like Alabama, Georgia in the national title, the thing that jumps out to me is, God, their players are just so much better than everybody else's. Like this is a different level of athlete. You know what I mean? So it's players that make the difference. It is. Coaches have a big role in it. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, I mean, when you look at Alabama and they've got a 90% blue chip ratio, there's a reason Alabama's Alabama. It all comes down to recruiting. And again, I would say this, again, fans, stars aren't everything. But if South Carolina under Shane Beamer, if they get to a point where they're in the SEC title game, let's say 5 years from now, right? It happens. The Gamecocks go to Atlanta. It will be because we will look back and say recruiting changed. South Carolina elevated their recruiting significantly. They went from pulling in classes 20 to 25 to, at minimum, I'd say 10 to 15. That will be the reason, because players play the games.
And on the surface, that doesn't sound like a difference, but that is a difference.
It's a huge difference.
10 and 20, it's a huge difference.
But you
got to develop them.
Right.
Sure.
But you know what's crazy too, though, is that under Steve Spurrier, they weren't recruiting at that level yearly. They had that one class in 2007 that was ranked 7th, and they had a couple top 20 classes, don't get me wrong, but the class that Marcus Lattimore signed in 2010, that class was ranked 25th. But they were able to couple with the 5 stars they pulled in were names. Gilmore, Jeffrey, Lattimore, Clowney. Garcia was a piece of that 07 class. And then guess what they did? They took 3 stars like Melvin Ingram, DJ Swearinger, Connor Shaw. Hell, Dylan Thompson was a 2-star, and they got the most out of him. Patrick DeMarco was a 2-star, caught a touchdown in that SEC title game. So there's a mix. I'm not saying that, if you don't recruit at a top 10 recruiting level, you don't have a chance. But again, at the end of the day, it's players that play the game. And the team that has the best players, they're typically going to win. So you got to go get those guys. Jimmys and Joes, not X's and O's. I'm just saying that. And you got to love what you're seeing as a Gamecock fan. If South Carolina especially finishes, if they finish top 20 in recruiting this year, because I think it's a chicken or the egg conversation with recruiting. You need great players to win games, right? But you need to also show progress and win some games to attract better players. Because these good players don't want to go play for a dog shit team. I'm sorry, but 5-star Nicholas Harbor, or whatever his name is, the number 1 player in the country, he don't want to go play for a team that's going 6-6. He wants to go somewhere he can go compete for a title. Because that team that's competing for a title, he's going to get the most exposure. Scouts are going to be watching his every move, and he's going to get to the league. And he's also going to win in the meantime. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to. Jadeveon Clowney chose South Carolina because they had just gone to the SEC title. And he felt like, I can go here and help them take the next step and win big. So, it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act. But I think Shane Beamer I think he's doing everything on the recruiting trail to take that next step and make it happen in the long run.
I just pulled up the 247 Sports team talent rankings, total team talent rankings. That's the composite of the entire roster in the recruiting rankings. Alabama's 1, Georgia's 2, Ohio State's 3, Clemson's 4, LSU 5, and Oklahoma's 6. That is the entire playoff. That is the history of the college football playoff, those 6 teams.
Yeah. That's proofs in the pudding, as we like to say, Mark. Proofs in the pudding. That's it. Again, stars, they don't matter to the fan bases of the teams that don't recruit at a high level. But they do matter. They do matter.
When you look at the SEC, it appears to me Alabama and Georgia have separated. Vandy's bottom rung. Right. And then 3 through 13, sure, you can think, man, Texas A&M should be near the top. Maybe LSU, maybe Missouri near the bottom. But really,
wide open.
Yeah.
Wide open. Yeah. I think the Gamecocks, again, because you can make every excuse in the book, Mark, about the schedule and, well, maybe Rattler's not as good as they say. Well, the offensive line this and the defense that. But at some point, if South Carolina under Shane Beamer, they want to be one of those teams, you got to have a breakout season. You got to go win 8 games this year. You got to break some of these streaks and these trends you got, right? You got to break the trend against Kentucky. Maybe you got to beat Arkansas and Fayetteville. You got to snap your 3-game losing streak to Mizzou. You need to beat Texas A&M. You've lost 8 in a row to them and never beaten them before. You need to snap a 7-game losing streak to Clemson. You got to break through at some point, right? If you're going to take the next step, and it took Spurrier a while to do it, right? Let's keep that in mind, too. It took him a while. They had some early success, won the Liberty Bowl in year 2, had a nice, 8-win season in that second year. But years 3, 4, I believe 5, it was a struggle. It was a struggle winning 6 games. Spurrier was never really able to find his quarterback. It was a carousel between Blake Mitchell and Savell Newton and Chris Smelly. And then you had a freshman Garcia who I don't think was ready. Obviously, he was a knucklehead. We have him on our show every Monday. So it's going to take time. Be patient. But at some point, a signature win's got to happen, right? And so I don't want to heap all the expectations in year 2, but what the transfer portal has done, it has changed, I think, the whole rebuilding idea, right? Where it's like South Carolina landed a Spencer Rattler. Normally for a coach before transfer portal was a thing, in recruiting, you're probably not pulling a guy like that in recruiting until year 3 or 4, until you've really shown progress and, you know what I mean? Built your culture. So you could argue South Carolina is a little bit ahead of schedule in that regard. Again, I'm not saying all that to say have unrealistic expectations. If they don't win 8 games, it was a failure. But like you mentioned, it's wide open. Who's going to take it? Because like you said, we know Georgia and Bama are at the top, and we know Vandy's at the bottom, right? Who's going to take it? Who's going to take the 3 spot? Who's going to take the 4 spot? The SEC hierarchy thing is a big deal. That's why I think it's important for, hey, for example, a South Carolina to take advantage of a Florida that has a first-year coach. It's important for the Gamecocks at home against Tennessee to reverse that trend against the Volunteers and beat, because South Carolina and Tennessee are kind of in similar spots. 2 programs that are trying to have positive trajectory, and that the result of that game matters. It matters for those 2 teams, right, in regards to the hierarchy. Kentucky, they're getting picked preseason to finish second in the East. Result of that game matters. If Carolina's ever going to get back to even getting close to sniffing where Georgia is, they've got to beat Kentucky, Mark. They got to beat Kentucky. You can't lose to Kentucky. You can't lose to Mizzou. You got to beat Mizzou, right? There's just certain games you got to win. And again, this is an opportunity this year, right? We can make every excuse in the book, but at some point, you're going to come into a year and say, okay, you got to break out, or either you're going to be stuck at 6-6 forever. You know what I mean? Which we all want more than that. So maybe this year is the year. I hate to put these crazy lofty expectations on Beamer and company so early, but on the other hand, you got all the pieces. And now you've got the quarterback, which is the most important position on the field. So maybe it'll happen this year. I mean, you got the opportunity there. I mean, like Arkansas, for example, week 2 is a fantastic opportunity. Great opportunity. I know our fan base is excited for it. Unfortunately, I feel like a lot of people are putting all their hopes and expectations on that game. It's like, all right, if this season's going to be worth a damn, Carolina's got to beat Arkansas. I don't think that's the mentality people should take. But I will say this, Mark. I've labeled Mizzou as the most important game of the year. To me, to have a successful season, you got to beat Mizzou at home. If you lose that one, we got a whole other set of issues. Arkansas is the biggest swing game, where it's like, losing to Arkansas won't wreck your season. I picked you to lose. But if you beat Arkansas, all bets are off. Carolina becomes the sexy thing in the SEC. Watch out for the Gamecocks. Week 3 against Georgia at home, all bets are off. Willie B will be shaking, right? All bets are off. Kentucky, to me, is the biggest inflection point, because it's like we mentioned. Realistically, Carolina loses to Arkansas and Georgia. They whack Charlotte and SC State. They come in that game 3-2, 0-2 in SEC play. And I think the result of that Kentucky game will just tell you a lot of like which directions this season going. The biggest inflection point. You beat Kentucky, okay, shot at 7-8 wins, it's there. You lose to Kentucky, and like we mentioned, you get off to a 3-3 start, 0-3 in SEC play, and then you go into the bye week, Mark, with a lot of questions. You talk about Satterfield, his job status, his seat will be boiling if Carolina hadn't won an SEC game yet. Again, does the finger pointing start? The fan base will be in full meltdown mode. So that Kentucky game, it may not be the most important, but it is a massive, massive ball game on that schedule. So again, there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of questions. And like we mentioned at the top of the show, Mark, the only way we're going to get answers is for toe to meet leather in 30 days, and we get after it. So